Welcome back to another Seed Pod podcast.
Hello.
We're on episode 16 of the Seed Pod,
16.
but episode 6 of The Chosen, because right now we are going through the series The Chosen.
We are. I'm enjoying it because I haven't been through it before.
Yep, and we're kind of catching up to where I ended when I stopped watching it. So
okay.
I think one of my last episodes was The Woman at the Well.
I think that's next or next to next or something.
Yeah,
like
it's
that.
coming up. It's
it's
coming up
8.
quick. But The Chosen, so far, what you're seeing and what's different about this series, to me, is it's coming from the perspective of those who have been chosen by Jesus. You're not following Jesus always, all the time, and there are times you are, but a lot of it is how do people perceive him?
He's a life changer.
Yeah. And so in this episode, you've got a lot of stuff going on. Like right at the beginning, you got the leper coming out to be healed.
Yeah, and that the lady who's gathering flowers sees it.
Yep.
And she's like, ah!
And she's from Egypt, and Jesus starts talking to her in Egyptian.
Yeah, I know, because he was raised there.
He was
Isn't
raised
that cool?
there. And it's just one of those things you don't think about.
No.
When you're kind of reading through, you forget, he was raised in Egypt.
He was.
I mean, at least
Out
was
of
there.
Egypt did I call my son.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of interesting connections they put together. And then that lady is in connection with when they bring the lame man,
Yeah, she's a friend.
lower him down through the roof because they've seen. And that just goes to show you that these miracles, why are people keep coming to Jesus? Well, they're seeing and hearing things that they've never seen or heard before.
No, Nicodemus keeps getting freaked out by all this. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool, too. I think he's about ready to visit him now.
Yeah, you're building that anticipation. And Nicodemus, you can kind of tell. I really love his conversation with Shemuel, who's the other Pharisee.
Yeah. That's cool.
And the other Pharisee is behaving so much like what we typically think of as Pharisees.
Yeah, he basically is one of the movers and shakers in getting John the Baptizer arrested, and it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah. And Nicodemus just kind of sits down with him, and one of my favorite conversations, one of my favorite things to even look at with the Bible, is because when we read the Bible, we read of a lot of works of God.
Yeah.
We read of a lot of things that God did in a
Yes.
very miraculous way, and sometimes we think, well, God is done. And Nicodemus has the same conversation with Shmuel in the sense of, don't you want to be a part of a movement that, yes, we have the law, and it is there.
We're not throwing it away, but
we're
can't God do other things?
We've put him in a box.
That's it.
We say, this is what God can do, and this is what God cannot do.
Yeah, Shemuel is all over that. Well, he wouldn't do this, he wouldn't do that. God doesn't have a body, and he said, well,
Hang on.
let's just
Why don't we let God
show
us?
Let him be in charge. It reminds me of a certain belief that everybody's already been chosen.
Yeah.
In honoring God's sovereignty, you're telling him what to do.
Yeah. And which is always an interesting, aspect of it. But this episode to me, I remember watching, I had to ask Edwin this morning. I said, we watched it last week. We were planning to record, and then we had, life
All
happen.
kinds of stuff.
All stuff. And so I had to kind of get refreshed, but one of the things that I remember, and this is one of the things I really like the series, I just remember being very it was the first episode that almost the entire episode held my emotions in a way where I was on the verge of just breaking down.
Oh, I was late last night.
Yeah.
I was watching it, and I didn't know how to do the screen time, look at anything. But man, I was tearing up all over the place.
It's just Peter and all of them get, they're talking we get to witness this. Right? I remember him talking to Mary, we're a part of this.
We're here.
We're here. We get to see, and the long-awaited Messiah has come.
It's not like they thought, which they're kind of two worlds.
Yeah.
They're appreciating it's not like we thought, but they're still looking but it's going to be that way.
Yeah.
And eventually that all comes together.
Yeah. And Jesus at a house, and he's teaching, and all these crowds are gathering, right?
Word's getting out.
And the word's getting out, and the disturbance,
The Romans
that
are
is
having
being
to be careful
caused,
about.
and the Pharisees are concerned, well, what kind of rabbi is this? Who's this teacher? What's his
Who
authority?
authorized you? What school did you go to?
And that's the question Jesus is asked all the time. By what authority are you doing these things?
It's not whether he's right or wrong.
Yeah.
Which is in itself an interesting feature.
Yeah. And, then we have the healing of the lame man as he's being brought down. And I love that scene. To me just is powerful, where the Pharisees are looking in, and he goes, your faith has made you well, your sins are forgiven, and they just,
Yeah.
they light up.
Yeah, and he takes the dialogue then, and it's just you're doubtless thinking only God can forgive sins, and he's kind of the one who speaks it in The Chosen, and he's but when he says, but what's easier to say?
Yeah.
And then when he get up and walk, if you had been there as a Pharisee,
Yeah.
you're going to have something going on.
Well, then you got Nicodemus in the background.
Oh yeah.
I mean, about to just break.
When
He's close.
the guy passes by him, there's this moment that kind of cinematographically isolates him as he walks by. You can see all this stuff going on in his head.
Yeah. Well, then Nicodemus finally asked Mary, he's like, I need to talk to him.
I got to anely, anytime, any place. I just got to.
Yeah, it don't matter if it's night. It don't matter,
In a tomb or
you know,
something.
he needs to ask some questions, kind of like he did with John the Baptist. He's investigating.
Yeah.
So there goes to show you, there's the emotional aspect of Christianity. It needs to be there. Like you need to be convicted. You need to feel what Jesus is bringing to the table, but you also, it can't just be about that.
Right. You
There's
got
gotta
to
be-
justify your emotions.
Yeah, there's got to be some concrete, like, okay, because, we can get touchy-feely about a lot of things.
Oh yeah, people do.
And sometimes you figure out the things you get touchy-feely about, well, that wasn't really
Maybe
true.
not.
You know?
No, it's a little too touchy-feely there. No, and that's the thing. The Nicodemus character symbolizes in many ways a lot of people.
Yeah.
They kind of want to believe, but they're not sure. They kind of want to believe, but they're not sure. It's a big commitment, and that process is a lot of people go through that.
I had a opportunity last night, and I won't say any names, to talk to somebody about my faith, and it's somebody who knows there's something out there, but has seen what Christianity has become or has done, or they've had some bad experiences, and so my job, and I had a couple of my other believers with me, who we were all kind of just sharing why we really like the Lenore City Church, why we really like the group here and the family here, is because it does seem different in the sense of
Yeah.
when you get back to the genuine, raw, what did Jesus teach? Because when you start adding anything to Jesus' teachings and his ways,
It's more than you need.
it was a really,
It distorts it.
yeah, one of my friends, his illustration is, it's like looking into a mirror, but you ever like spray like that fog on a mirror, and the more layers you put on,
Yeah.
that image that you're seeing gets so distorted you don't
Yeah.
even know what it is anymore.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And it's kind of what Christianity has become.
Yeah, in the distance there, in a
Yeah.
vague way, is this Jesus guy, but who is he?
But this person was just wanting to know, why do you believe what you believe? Like, I mean, I get there's something out there, but how do you know what the God of the Bible is the one? With all these other gods, with all these other religions.
Which is a great question to have somebody ask.
Yeah. So it was really, I started to think, as you brought up, Nicodemus, that same questioning thing you see in Nicodemus's eyes and face is what I saw yesterday as we were talking with somebody. And it's not that they don't want to believe. It's that they want a reason.
Yeah, they don't want
need
to
a
make a
reason.
fool of themselves, so to speak. No, and I think that's in our Wednesday night class, Sunday night class. What's today? That's
Yeah.
Our Sunday night class. I started a thing for September on basically evangelism.
Yeah.
But one of the things I was talking about, we're going to need to put ourselves in a certain context of understanding. And the world now has been corrupted by bad Christianity.
Yeah.
And so we're dealing with people, and we say Jesus, we say Christianity, we say this or that, and their immediate understanding is this in varying degrees. We need to do the old come and see thing,
Yeah.
and bring them into reality.
And I think that's what I'm gaining the most out of this show so far, is what would it have looked like? What would the first believers, the first movement, get rid of the church buildings,
Yeah, take this institutionalization
get rid of
away.
all of the stuff we have put into it? What would have looked like just to follow Jesus around and listen to him talk? Because really that's what our lives outside of being at the church building should look
Yes.
like.
We may have some people here who have been to the Holy Land, but even if you haven't, you've probably seen pictures and all of the places, be they true places or not, that are supposed to be meaningful in Jesus' life. They build these huge, elaborate things around, which is nothing like what was going on with Jesus
Yeah.
at the time. It masks the humanity of it.
Yeah. And then you've got Matthew.
Bless his heart.
you know, but bless his heart, but man, at least he's trying.
He is.
I even like the scene where he goes before Peter and Andrew, and he's wanting to ask more, and Peter's so suspicious.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Like, Peter's wanting to defend Jesus. He's wanting to protect Jesus. He's wanting to kill somebody if he can.
rough up Matthew.
You know?
Yeah.
And you know, hold Matthew by the shirt, and there's just that power. And you just see Matthew going, like, you don't understand why I'm asking. I'm not asking to try to, you know,
Rat him out.
I need to know.
Well, Nicodemus is much the same way with
Yeah.
Mary. I just need to talk with him. I'm not trying to do anything.
Yeah. And then you got the children on the scene who's sitting up on the
they're
roof.
being children.
And those
We know who
children
he
are the
is.
same from episode, I think, 2.
Yeah, where he had some time with them and all.
Yeah. And they ask Matthew the question. What do they ask him?
Are you lost?
Are you lost?
And he says, yes, I am.
And that's really, when it comes down to what appeals, I think, God and Christianity is, you look out into this world, you see all that's going on, and you can kind of feel lost.
Yeah, people do. I was talking about in the class I was mentioning, Ecclesiastes 3:11. There's an empty place in us that we can only fill with God.
Yeah.
And so we know when we go out and about that people who haven't found God have an empty place. They can fake it, they can do all kinds of things, but they cannot be whole. They cannot be found unless they find themselves in God.
And they constantly try to fill that with things that are inadequate.
Yes.
And one of our job is to show them that there is that itching you're feeling for purpose.
Check it out.
There's something
Validate
more.
it.
Yeah, there's something more. out there.
Ecclesiastes, Solomon goes on one of those searches. He looks in all the wrong places, and he doesn't find it. Finally, he remembers what he knew in the first place, and this is where it is. It's with God.
Yeah. And so this episode, I think, was great.
Yes.
I think it held it's really the one, I remember watching it the first time.
It's a little longer than most, but you don't really notice it till it's over.
Yeah, but it really, this is the one that got me, okay, this series is going to be good.
Yeah, it's worth watching.
The other ones have been good.
Kind of a setup.
And it's been set up, but now we're starting to move. Jesus is starting to teach. He's publicly announcing himself. People are starting to notice. It's not just a couple fringe people here and there.
Building up. And it's another thing. The setup isn't the most compelling things, but life has a lot of setup things you got to do before you get to the good stuff. If you cut to the chase has nothing to support it. So you really have to go through looking at the things that maybe aren't as exciting or the kind of things you most want to know about before you can really appreciate the good stuff.
Yeah. So I think it's a great series. No matter what's happened so far and some of the choices they've made, whether you disagree with them, overall, you've got to understand that this is a perspective from Jesus' followers and those who know him and what they're seeing. And that's kind of like the Gospels. Why do you have 4 different accounts? You're kind of getting Matthew's take. You're kind of getting John's take.
Yeah, and even the
You're getting Mark's
synoptics
take.
have differences
Yeah.
that you would expect because different people see things different ways.
Yeah, and writing to different people. But I think in today's culture, this series is speaking to our culture very much.
It's catching on
in a way that's appealing.
You hear and see people who talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
Because that's been something missing in their, if you will, Christian experience.
Yeah. Joe Rogan recently on a podcast, and I wouldn't recommend all the stuff, but it just happened to come, a Chosen thing came up, and he found out how many people are watching this independently, and that it's an independent.
Yeah.
You know, it's not, Netflix isn't doing this.
You individually.
It's crowdfunded, and the amount of people who are watching it. And he's just kind of like, I didn't really think there were that many Christians still who are interested in something like that.
And you're not going to know that from the media.
Yeah.
They don't want to know it, for one thing, and another thing, they don't think it's there. But it is.
Yeah. So there's episode 6. Hopefully maybe this week or next week we can watch episode 7 and record it a little closer, so I have a little more details of remembering. But a lot happened this week where
life happens, you know.
Yeah. So then we'll start doing some recording in Acts. So
we're starting to wind down Acts to get to you know what.
Romans.
The big R.
And people are, I'm sure they're excited to get to it. I'm excited to get to it.
Yeah.
I think Romans is one of those books when you first read it, you kind of go, what? You know, there's some things you can understand, but overall you're kind of like, that's a hard book. But if you can just get where Paul's going and stay with his kind of his theme, It's really not that hard of a
It
book.
really isn't. You get your ahas. Oh yeah, that's what. And he repeats himself.
Yeah.
He adds layers and stuff like that. So it is an attainable book.
Yeah, he goes off on a riff, then he'll come
he
back.
comes back.
And sometimes people don't see that. Like, people don't realize, are not expecting a riff in a letter. And then you got to realize, oh, he's just coming back to what he was talking about here.
Yeah.
This was a riff.
Had a little sideline. Yeah. No,
We do that all the time,
we do.
but we don't expect,
Inspiration.
inspiration to do that. Well, it's written by humans, but inspired by God.
God knows how humans operate.
Yeah. So anyway, we love you. We
Yes.
hope you enjoyed this. Go check out episode 6. Let us know your thoughts.
Yes.
Your
Ask
comments?
questions, for goodness sakes.
Yeah. Maybe there are things you saw and you go, why'd they do this?
Sure.
We'll be glad to answer that. We love you. God bless.
Bye-bye.